Is the motion seconded?
Certainly is, Madam Speaker. I second the motion.
Well,
At the heart of the matter—
you'd better wait for the call. I call the honourable member for McMahon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Australian people know that this government is unfair and out of touch, and they know it is chaotic and incompetent as well. And they know that at the heart of the matter, this Prime Minister has no judgment. This Prime Minister has no judgment when it comes to important decisions or important statements. The Australian people never know what's going to come out of his mouth next, and nor do the people sitting behind him. Nor do the people sitting behind him know what he's about to say next, who he's about to insult, or what policy he's about to change on the run, what captain's pick he's about to make in this captain's chaos government, Madam Speaker. At the heart, we have a Prime Minister and a Treasurer who are not up to their jobs. A Prime Minister and a Treasurer who are not up to the task given to them by the Australian people. At its heart, we have a Prime Minister and a Treasurer who have failed in everything they have set out to do. We've got a government, Madam Speaker, which campaigned across the country on debt and deficit, called it a disaster, and yesterday the Prime Minister says 50 to 60% is a pretty good result. No wonder those behind him and across the Australian people are shaking their head at his lack of judgment, at his lack of a strategy, at his lack of an economic plan. He pulls things out of the air, he insults the Australian people, he insults the intelligence of commentators, he insults the House, all as an excuse and an alibi for his failures, Madam Speaker. But there's one thing that doesn't change. The excuses change, the alibis change, the story changes day to day, hour to hour, but one thing never changes: the people who pay the price. The ordinary Australians who are working hard right across the country, Australia's pensioners, who pay the price for this Prime Minister's lack of judgment, who pay the price for this Treasurer's lack of competence. They are the ones who daily pay the price, because at its heart the one thing that never changes is this government's prejudice. Prejudice against working Australians, prejudice against Australia's pensioners. That's what never changes. We've got a government that campaigned on debt and deficit and then doubles the deficit, and then boasts that they've halved the deficit. It's like Uncle Arthur's car yard. They put the prices up the day before the sale and then say it's half price. Madam Speaker, we've got this government which treats the Australian people with such contempt, which pretends that the last election campaign never happened, who'd like to pretend the last budget never happened as well. But the Australian people know the last budget happened. The government might prefer to forget it. The Treasurer might pretend it never occurred. The Prime Minister might say, well, we won't make that mistake again. We won't be doing that again. But the Australian people know what this Prime Minister and this Treasurer in their hearts really want to do. If they ever get the chance again, they want to do everything they attempted in the last budget and more. They want to cut the age pension. They want to take the age pension down to 16% of average weekly earnings. That's what they want to do. A bipartisan policy for 40 years. 40 years ago, an Australian Prime Minister said Australia's pensioners deserve a share of our growing prosperity. 40 years ago, Madam Speaker, an Australian Prime Minister said Australian pensioners should have their incomes grow as Australia's wage incomes grow. That was Gough Whitlam. That was Gough Whitlam who said that, and it was a bipartisan policy, followed by Malcolm Fraser, followed by Bob Hawke and Paul Keating, followed by John Howard, until this Prime Minister and this Treasurer, without a skerrick of a mandate, say to Australia's pensioners, you do not deserve to share in our prosperity. We will make you pay for our mistakes. That's what we get from this Prime Minister and this Treasurer, who are not up to the job. They talk of the intergenerational report, Madam Speaker, a document that is the property of the Treasurer, that the Treasurer wrote. We had the Prime Minister yesterday claim that the budget will be back in broad balance in just 5 years. Another one of his great statements that his backbenchers just couldn't wait to hear. The sermon he presented, that the budget will be back in balance in just 5 years. Forget about the 40 years of deficits after that. Nothing to see here, says the Prime Minister. Don't worry about that, our job is done. Well, as Peter Costello said, there is a problem with the government's narrative. There certainly is. But more importantly than that, there is a problem with the government's substance. There's a problem with the government's competence. And most of all, there's a very big problem with this Prime Minister's judgment. At its heart, Madam Speaker, this Prime Minister is not up to the job. This Treasurer is not up to the job. The Australian people have given them a great honour, and in return They have insulted them. They have given them policies which cut their incomes. They have given them policies which are bad for the economy as well as bad for Australian families. The Prime Minister said this week we won't make Australian families pay for the return of our budget to surplus. Well, he tried that last time. The Australian people know he's just not up to it.